So I was in a position where one, I had to find another club, or two, I had to go and find a job. To change my kind of workplace at that time, you would argue was a risk, but it was something that I just wanted to do. There come a time where the Far East competition was overtaking our sales, and I tend to look after the individual probably more than I should. And so these cheaper models were coming in, and they were taking our market. In essence, that's what was happening. And we all worked together, and we all ate together. It really was like a family, to be quite honest. And so we all enjoyed the good times, and we worked hard when it was the bad times.
So Peter, in your early days, there was a choice. You could have even been a professional footballer, by the sounds of it, or a toolmaker, and you chose the toolmaking route. That's why we're sitting here today. But maybe tell our audience about why that choice was there and what happened in your very early career.
Well, first of all, I'd rather have been a footballer, that's for sure. But yes, I had the opportunity when I was around about 15, and I'd been playing for the county at the time, and I was an England schoolboy trialist, and consequently from there I signed for Leicester City, and did that for really 2 years, and at which point Leicester got relegated and got to the cup final and lost, and decided to cut all the youth team at the time. So I was in a position where one, I had to find another club, or two, I had to go and find a job. So I went to a local company in Birmingham, and went for an interview to be an apprentice toolmaker.
What sort of footballer were you? A good one? A bad one? Left back, right back?
No, I was a centre forward in my day, and I was I don't know. I was quite good, of course, but not good enough to be a professional footballer long term, you know. But I played football after that, semi-professional, for about 10 years, well, more than 10 years.
Really, and we should say now that we're in amongst the Euro knockout stages at the moment. So when this is published, we'll probably know whether England, or when they lost or when they won. How would you compare to the team these days? Would you have fitted in?
Well, most definitely they're fitter than we would. You know, we would go training over twice a week, and then end up in the bar afterwards. You know, where today's footballers just don't do that. So you know, they're obviously fitter. The tactics are much better, and the conditions of the pitches are obviously greater, and the ball's lighter, and arguably it's easier today than it was in my time. Let's put it that way.
Peter, we're going to talk a lot today about about you and your opinions on things, and some of the experiences you've gone through in your career within manufacturing. And just explain to start with about your positions now within Sodick and Sodick, so people can get a feel for, if they don't know you, who you are and what you do.
Yeah, well, we operate from this premises in Warwick. It's 45,000 square feet, with a dedicated showroom and warehouse and parts division, primarily looking after the Sodick product for the whole of Europe. It used to include Russia, but of course doesn't anymore. And at the same time, Sodick is one of the dealers for Sodick, and Sodick share the premises with Sodick. Kind of a unique situation, you could say, but I'm MD of Sodick Tech, and have been for the last 33 years, since it's at the beginning of the company, and I'm CEO of Sodick Europe. So really, the two jobs kind of mix into one, because we've both got the same aim. All we want to do is sell machines and look after the customer. You know, so yeah, both the companies run out of this building. And
you set this up then, you set Sodick Tech up 33 years ago, yes, as you said, and you were then the distributor for the Sodick product. That was the biggest step and the biggest jump in your life into, or biggest career move, I guess? Would that be fair to say?
Yeah,
The biggest risk you'd take?
Well, it was a risk because at the time I was sales director of Bridgeport, which was in itself was quite a big job, looking after 40 odd countries along with a team of international sales managers. So to change my kind of workplace at that time, you would argue was a risk, but it was something that I just wanted to do. You know, I love the product and still do, and I had the opportunity to represent the product in the UK at the time. So I was young enough, had enough ambition. I was dedicated to product, so I didn't think about the risks at the time.
And you tend not to when you're of that age. And I mean, before we talk about that, you know, the last 33 years, which will have had its ups and downs, and there'll be lots of interesting stuff to pick out of you from that. When Leicester decided that they were going to not stop the youth academy, you went in to become a toolmaker then, didn't you? And that's where really Peter Capp started his sort of manufacturing career. What did you do?
With the toolmaking,
yeah.
Okay. Well, first thing you have to do is you have to find yourself a job, which I did, and then you then were going to college twice a week to take your city and guilds, and after 4 years, supposedly you're an accomplished toolmaker, but of course life starts from there. Didn't start the 4 years before.
But the company that you were doing this, that you were working for, was Lucas, wasn't it? This was it.
No, yeah. I moved to Lucas from where I did my apprenticeship.
Okay, yeah.
Lucas came on a little bit later in my life, and that was another big career move because Lucas was a large electrical company in the Birmingham area, supplying at the time British Leyland or Rover, or you want to call it, with all their electrical items, and had a large tool room where I worked. We had 120 people in the tool room, and so and covered all the aspects of tool making. You know, so that was a big move for me. But I was young enough to be able to move to this larger company. They were after younger staff, so that was another big move. Yeah.
But tool making then compared to tool making now, it's still the kind of same end product, isn't it? What you're trying to achieve, but it's how you go about the stages of the manufacturing process, the machinery that you use, the hands-on differences between then and than now. That's where you kind of get your skill from, I guess, isn't it?
Well, it is, because in those days, before wire erosion, for example, you know, most of the parts, I was working on lamination dies, which are tungsten carbide. So most of the dies were split, and they would be ground on a Jones and Shipman 540 grinding machine. And then following that, of course, wire erosion kind of appeared, and the whole process of manufacturing changed, because you could create a hole or a shape in hardened material as long as it was conductive very accurately. So wire erosion kind of changed that.
And that's where you first experienced wire erosion.
It was, because you could argue stupidly, but I volunteered to take this new role on the wire erosion machine, not even knowing what it was. I hadn't got a clue. And so I volunteered, and out of 120 people in the tool room, I was the only one. I thought I'd made a mistake there, but obviously I didn't, going on from what I've done today. But yeah, it was a big move, and the company at the time bought a machine. It wasn't a Sodick, I hasten to say, but I went on the training scheme for that, and then we produced the lamination dies.
And what were those dies for?
To make the laminations for the starter motor.
Right, okay.
So fine blanking.
Right.
So accuracy was around, at the time, you know, accuracy, we didn't talk microns then, really, I suppose, but we're probably talking 10, 15 microns. Whereas today we're talking 2 or 3 microns.
Yeah. Some stories that you've mentioned to me in the build up to this podcast about things that you learn in your young days, and how industry's changed as well. You were on strike for 10 days at one point during your time.
10 weeks.
10 weeks. 10 weeks.
10 weeks.
I mean,
was on strike.
how did the company? So I mean, what, 10 weeks on
well,
strike?
we were after more money and recognition as tool makers at the time, and Lucas didn't play ball with us. Yeah, I went on strike for 10 weeks and had I didn't even have a family then, but had a house, had a mortgage. So I ended up working on a farm for 6 of the weeks.
But it's almost inconceivable to think of going on strike for 10 weeks now, isn't it? And,
Yeah.
and you know, the impact that has on the individual, the impact it has on the business, the impact it has on the economy. What happened after the strike?
Well, after the strike, as I mentioned to you before, they gave us £150 bonus when we went back to work. And unfortunately, my gearbox on my car broke down, and I had to buy a new gearbox, which was actually £150, strangely enough. And I actually put it in myself on the drive.
And was there any subsequent strikes after that?
No.
Or did
No, because to have a job in the tool room at the time, you had to be in the union. So we were in the AEUW, and so everybody was in the same union. And the whole group toolmaking industry went on strike. But you know, nobody wins on a strike, let's put it that way, and we certainly didn't.
And that's where your foundation for knowledge and applications and engineering and machining and wire erosion all came from. And then you kind of took a stop. Would you say a step off the shop floor then into the applications role that you had?
Yeah, what happened was that, as I mentioned before, they purchased 2 machines, and one of which was actually a FANUC machine. And after a number of years, I was approached by FANUC to work for them as an application engineer. It was a move away from the Midlands. I had to move down towards High Wycombe, but I felt as though that was the thing to do. I'd had a lot of experience. I was a tool maker. I'd been working on the EDM machines or wire erosion machines for a number of years, and I was confident in doing that job, so why not?
How long did you do that for, Peter? What was the
applications?
Yeah.
I did that for around about 3 years at a company called Spark.
Right, yeah.
Which no longer exists. And the FANUC agency changed from a Spark to the 600 group. 600 group being a much larger group, including Colchester and other machinery of the type at the time. And I headed up the team at Sykes Machine Tools, the 600 group in Staines, looking after the FANUC product.
Right. Okay. And then we've got something in common, which was really interesting to me in the build up to this. We were talking about Bridgeport, and this is where you spent a significant part of your career. What did you do there, or what was your role there, and how much? I suppose that was the next step in your career, wasn't it?
It was the next step, and again, I was lucky enough to be headhunted by Bridgeport, and being a Midlands lad, it meant I could move back to the Midlands from down the south. And Bridgeport were launching their wire EDM and EDM machines that they were selling, which was a Japax machine. I hadn't got a lot of knowledge about the machine at the time, but I just thought, well, at the time, Bridgeport were probably the largest machine tool manufacturer in the UK. You know, so it was an easy move for me, and I went there as a technical sales executive on the Japax product, and was quickly dispatched to Japan for training on the product.
And then, so Bridgeport to me, Peter, I worked there in the year 2000 for about 2 years out of Leicester, where the machines were made. It was not as big a company then as it was when you were there in sort of the early 90s. You stated some amazingly tremendous figures of what the business was turning over and what you personally were responsible for, which I think would be great for our listeners to hear, because it was some company back then, and these are things I didn't even know.
Yeah, well, we employed a lot of people. Notwithstanding the factory in Leicester, we had a factory in Bridlington with equal number of people, and then we had another manufacturing plant in Singapore where we made the BR2Js and the Interacts. Singapore would supply America and the Far East, and Bridlington and Leicester would supply the whole of Europe with their machinery. But yeah, on my side of the business, we were looking at £1 million a week was our target of turnover of machines.
£1 million, £52 million a year.
Yeah, but when we had dealers that were taking 20, 30, 40 machines off us at any one time.
But we're talking about these, and listeners may or may not be familiar with this, but like the BR2Js and the Interact machines, these aren't really high value pieces of kit. So you need to achieve this target. It's not like you got to sell 2 or 3 machines. You got to sell.
No, you got to sell
hundreds.
a lot. You got to sell a lot of machines.
Yeah.
But bear in mind, we were selling in more than 44 countries at the time, and so we went. And Bridgeport was the premier dealership that everybody wanted. So we had the best in every market, you name it, and we were there.
Were you kind of order taking rather than selling? If there is a differentiation,
I would say that'd be a fair comment. We were order taking because each market had their own ability, and particularly the larger markets, were much better at selling it than we were, for example, because their market was larger than the UK.
And did you then travel to all of these 44 countries, ensuring that the right distribution was in place and they were selling enough, and there'd be some that were overperforming, some that were underperforming, or was it simply just good times and everybody was delivering?
No, we had a group of sales people that had responsibilities for different markets. And of course, I was the director, so I was over those markets. And I spent a lot of time in development of the market. So I'd spent a lot of time in Australia, spent a lot of time in India, and another European markets that we were trying to develop the sales, because we were moving from the standard machinery to machining centres at the time, which were kind of newish, but they were still not so expensive. So yeah, I spent a lot of time, probably 16 to 20 weeks away a year.
Really? And you'd have had a young family at the time as well, I guess?
I did, yeah. Unfortunately, missed the kids' birthdays, holidays, anniversaries, you name it.
And you didn't take the family, I mean, so you'd spend a bit of time in Australia and then you'd come back and then you'd go back to, I mean, that's quite a responsibility, but also quite a stress, I guess, on yourself. Or did you love that period? I mean,
that was probably the best experience, really, of my working career, was to see other countries and to see just different industries. At the time, Australia was a growing market. They had a thriving car industry. It doesn't anymore, but it did at the time. The Far East, with Hong Kong, Thailand, the Philippines, Singapore itself, Indonesia, Malaysia, that was growing. So that was the growing part of it. Really was.
What happened to the car industry in Australia? Was it purely because of the manufacturing was then done?
The manufacturing was moved out, by General Motors mostly. It disappeared.
Yeah. Then what happened to Bridgeport before I started then is the Far Eastern competition became competition, didn't it? Which affected, I suppose, sales, affected the company in essence. And there's kind of 2 lines we spoke about where you needed to develop, but you needed to maintain sales, and Taiwan was catching up. And was that quite a challenging time? Yeah,
it was, because actually what people were doing was copying the Bridgeport, and they were very good at copying it, and they were copying it and manufacturing it cheaper than our machine. And so there come a time where the Far East competition was overtaking our sales, and we were more expensive. And
why couldn't you keep up? Why couldn't they keep up with what was happening over there?
Well, because as I explained to you earlier, what happened at Bridgeport, there was a management buyout from Textron, with a major company who owned them previously. And in any management buyout, there tends to be a lack of investment, and so the investment in R&D wasn't there. And so these cheaper models were coming in, and they were taking our market, in essence. That's what was happening. And
was it happening fast? Was it kind of
I would say over a period of about 3 to 4 years. We saw an emergence of machines coming out of Thailand and most definitely Taiwan at the time. Not so much China, but definitely Taiwan.
And do you think that the development of then the machining centres, which they became very popular here in the UK, was almost their response and reaction to that, and that's where they wanted to move their business towards?
Yes, so Bridgeport really wanted to develop the machining centre in various sizes, from the 350 size up to
which they successfully did.
Which they did, and we, as you know, we used the Hyde 9 control systems, which are worldly used by a lot of companies, but we needed more technical features on the machine to keep it competitive, and we also we needed more accuracy because the world was becoming, everything wanted to be more accurate at the time. And Bridgeport in itself was a great machine, but probably lacked on the accuracy side. Reliability side, we would match probably most of our competitors, but we needed to move to a different market.
And what did you learn in that time then that you were doing that, traveling the world, having the responsibility of these 44 countries, and what was the biggest things you took away from that period of your career?
Well, the diversity of what the machines were used for, to be quite, it wasn't just at the time, wasn't just car industry, it was medical, it was aerospace.
So it's kind of learning about the different applications of different parts, how
Yes.
things are made, where they're made.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. That was a huge experience for me, really, to be quite honest.
What about from a business level? Because then you go into setting up Sodick. There must have been things that during your time at Bridgeport commercially and all of those aspects that you brought into the foundation of that business that would have helped you immensely in your early days.
Yeah, because the discipline of Bridgeport was paramount, really, in helping me establish the company Sodick, because we were responsible for our own division, so we were responsible for our own expenditure. We had a budget, and any overhead we were responsible for. So it gave me that initial outlook to profit and loss. And so if we'd overspent or we hadn't sold the quantity of machines each month, then we had to report it and report why we'd overspent, why we hadn't sold the machines. Has the dealer got too much stock, or is the competition hitting us? Which competition? And so that discipline kind of gave me the opportunity
It was invaluable when you
it
started.
was completely invaluable, because when you start a business, you don't think about everything else that goes on. Or you know, there's so many things to think about, but it gave me that discipline of understanding cost.
And how hard was it to start Sodick? You know, having started a business in this podcast, Bench2Boardroom, we've learnt about all of the time of you being a toolmaker, being on the shop floor, going into setting up your own company. In your I think you were maybe 40 then, maybe, or a bit less.
Yeah.
So still a young man.
A bit less, yeah.
Hard.
Difficult, because first of all, you got to go down the bank with your wife and sign the papers to put your house on the line.
And that's what you did.
And that's what I did. And
what would you have had to put that on the line for? Was that so you could buy the machines to bring in? Was it?
Well, really, first of all, you needed cash, because we employed 13 people from day one. So we needed to make sure that we had enough salaries to cover that, and also the rent on the building that we'd taken. We had a unit from Coventry City Council. And so really you needed, at the time, I think we were looking at having at least 6 months' money so that we could establish ourselves in that 6 months and start to sell some machines and then start the cash flow.
And all of that clearly worked. I mean, you've got a thriving business here now and have had for decades. Would you do all that again now? And what difference do you see in business now to what you would have seen then in those days?
Well, I certainly wouldn't start again today, because I'm a different age, and you tend to, when you're younger, you're more enthusiastic. You don't see the pitfalls so much as you see when you get older. But yeah, the whole thing was different. And now we have health and safety policies, and we have inspections, we have carbon footprints. We're answerable to the bank, to the auditors. The whole thing is completely different than it was 33 years ago.
Do you think it's much harder to start up a business now than it would have been back in your day?
Much harder, much more difficult. First of all, even if you want to buy anything, back in those days, you could buy cars with employees. Even though we started with second-hand cars, you could buy them and probably get a loan. Today, if you haven't got an asset, you can't even borrow any money. The banks have become a lot more strict.
And I wanted to dig into a bit of your philosophy in business as well, because nowadays, we hear, and it's very accessible on social media, hearing about successful people, how they've grown their company, what their beliefs are. how they manage money, how they manage teams. When you started your company, you took a massive risk, put your house on the line, as you've said, but you were always very conscious about growing capital within the company, weren't you? And making sure
Yes.
you had money to the point where you set yourself a target, which would be great for us to.
I did. I set myself a target. As I might have mentioned to you before, moving from Bridgeport to start my own company, I earned 25% less for about the first 3 years, which is a tough thing to do, but it's what I wanted to do. And I set myself a target of not taking any money out of the company, but leaving the money in. And I had this huge target of achieving £1 million in the bank, which we achieved. And we had a copy of the bank statement, which I put in a frame and I put on the wall. And that was probably the biggest achievement, I would say.
And was that at that point you thought, yeah, I've cracked this?
No, because at that sort of stage we were becoming larger, we were selling more machines, we needed more staff, we needed to change the cars from second-hand cars to new cars, we needed a new premises because we were in a council unit, so that starts the growth really. That's not the end product, that's the starting. That's the starting line.
But it was kind of your benchmark to say, right, if I can get to that, that's what I want. That's my first hurdle. Once I've got to that, I then know I can take the next step in growing.
Yeah, because life becomes a little bit easier when you got some money behind you, and I knew that if we have a tough time, if we have another COVID example, then we could work our way through it, and that's really important. Because you've spent such a lot of time with the staff, and everybody knows the product, everybody was trained. What you don't want to do is start cutting staff, which we didn't. We grew the company.
Because I always think as well nowadays, it's too easy to get wrapped up in other people's beliefs in how they think you should operate, how you should run. And as I said earlier, social media, whether you use it or not, Peter, when things are so accessible, it's very easy to get influenced into how you should be doing things and how you should spend all your time listening to podcasts about how to work 2 hours a day yet still become a millionaire. And to me, there is no replacement for hard work, strategy, and graft to succeed in business, and that will never change. But within that, there's some clear parameters that you have to work within, and people that might influence you in the way that you probably know rather than have just seen on social media. What's your opinion on that, and who did you lean on, and what were your beliefs that if you did the things right, you would get to where you wanted to be?
Well, first of all, you can only get out what you put in. And if you don't put it in, you're not going to get it out. It's as simple as that. So you got to put the time and the effort into the business and your staff. To be quite honest, you need to look after your staff and make sure they're happy, and identify which staff needed an arm round, which needed encouragement or training to get the best out of them. Because the job is to get the best out of each individual.
And did you learn that by maybe not doing that? Sometimes we learn things by going, oh, God, I lost that person. If I only had done this or done that, and then you kind of build up your own method, I suppose.
Well, we never lost anybody at Sodick, so it was one of those. It was like a family business from day one, to be quite honest. And we all worked together, and we all ate together. It really was like a family, to be quite honest. And so we all enjoyed the good times, and we worked hard when it was the bad times, because you have to work harder when it's quieter than when you're really busy. You have to get the inquiries.
And you had one person though that you mentioned to me was somebody that was a big influence for you in your entire journey at Sodick.
Yeah, I was lucky enough when I was at Bridgeport to meet the chairman of Sodick, Mr. Furukawa, who really. For some reason, I don't know really why, but he took me under his wing. Maybe he liked what he saw, and most definitely I spent a lot of time with him over the years. And he'd built Sodick we built the first machine in his own garage at home, a Sodick machine, and he built the company through. And today, of course, it's stock market, a grade 1 in Tokyo. So, and I looked at what he'd done, and I listened to what he had to say to me, and he was a huge influence on where I am today, to be quite honest.
What was he good at? What were the things that you...
He was really good at looking not at the future, not tomorrow, not next week, not next month, but he was fantastic at looking like 6 months, 1 year, 2 years, 3 years. And I remember once when we announced, Sodick announced that they're going to have a factory in Thailand, and everybody went, wow, are you joking? What for? But at that time, Thailand was the growing economy. And I remember from our Bridgeport days that we were getting all our castings from Thailand anyway. So I knew Thailand had got an engineering base. And now, of course, we employ 1,400 people and got 2 factories in Thailand. You know, and so it was his vision really that really caught my eye.
What's the bad times you've had? Because there are them. There always has to be.
Yeah, the bad times would have been COVID probably in recently, but we managed through COVID. We didn't.
What about in the early days? Was there any real bad times in the?
Well, yeah, the pound died in about 1994. Can't remember the exact year, but that was a tough time. You know, where we'd purchased machines and the pound died by about 25%, and we ended up having to pay 25% more for the machines than we thought we were going to have to make.
Because you couldn't load the cost this end for your customer.
We'd already sold them.
Right.
You know, so yeah, there were bad times.
That must have got rid of pretty much all your margin.
Yeah, it did. It did. So we had to work equally as hard to replace it.
Yeah.
You know, and yeah, they were tough times, to be quite honest. But
what about 2008, 2009, when people report clearly manufacturing went through a tough time? So did the whole economy. Yes.
Well, but we were kind of been lucky in the fact that the machine's always been at the cutting edge. It's always been high accuracy, and the market that got hit the most was the average type of machine, which wasn't high accuracy. So we always had people that wanted to buy our machinery because they were at the top end too. You know, so yeah, there was a recession, but quite honestly, we managed through it, and we've never made a loss at Sodick.
And when you look at your business supplying the Sodick product here from Sodick UK, you don't offer any other products. And we were talking earlier, quite interestingly, about the distribution model and the risks involved for some companies that are just a distributor of a product, because you are then, all you have is your principal, don't you? You know, and if they change, your ownership changes there, you've got a massive risk. Has that ever worried you or concerned you? And I mean, obviously you've got 33 years under your belt, and not a lot's going to change now. But in the early days, everything is a risk, isn't it? And it does in this industry. I do think to myself, there's lots of distributors out there, and I think to myself, how secure actually are they? You would know more about the legals between yourselves and principals and so forth. But I always still think everything, there's always a get out. Everything can change. So I find it quite insecure, or I would.
Yes, you're right. But I was so close to Sodick at the time, and also I was in Japan 3 or 4 times a year. So I was in that circle of friends really. So that I always knew that wasn't going to happen to us. You know, and that's why we didn't take another product. We could have taken another product, Sodick, easily. Yeah. You know, a milling machine, a grinding machine. But we decided to focus our efforts only on Sodick, and as I explained to you before, the after sale, because forget selling the machine, but what's more important is the service and the parts and the help that you give to the end user. Otherwise, you're going to sell one and you're not going to sell another one. But I don't want to sell one. I want to sell 2, 3, 4, 5. And the only way you do that is to look after the customer. Yeah.
And so you're growing both of these kind of revenue opportunities, aren't you? New machines. Yes. and spares and so forth. Your relationship with Europe, our relationship changed back in 2016. Was that a big thing for you here?
It was. However, from a Sodick Europe point of view, we always kept our machines in Holland anyway. We have a bonded warehouse where we keep around 120 machines at any one time in a bonded warehouse in Holland. So the distribution of the machines into Europe was not a problem. And the distribution of the machine from Holland to the UK was not a problem. The problems arose after Brexit was moving machinery from the UK to another country in the EU and the amount of paperwork that was required.
And did you want to see Brexit happen, or did you not?
Well, my house was split because there was two of us wanted to stay in and two of us wanted to get out. And I understand that people want to get out, but personally, I would rather have stayed in.
Where do you think we are now as a nation in manufacturing, and how do you see the differences between Europe and here in terms of maybe the support they get from government compared to what we do? Are we doing better than they are? You must get a very close view of both sides.
Yeah, well, as you travel around Europe, you find out that a lot of the other countries in Europe, they give grants towards the machines, grants towards high accuracy machines, where we haven't probably done that since the early 90s. And particularly, example, I was in Ireland last week where they can get a grant up to 30% for a machine. They have to employ maybe 3 or 4 more people, for example. But again, it's very difficult in the UK to get that unless you're in a deprived area. So as you travel, yeah, we see countries where there's been lots more encouragement and help to the manufacturing industry.
Do you see that changing, or how could we change that?
Well, we can't change it now because obviously we've got no money. The countries, we're going to an election on Thursday, and I'm sure we've got tough times to come again. You always live in hope that something will come out of it, but short term, no, I don't see any help in the UK at all.
You as a person, Peter, as a leader, what would your colleagues and employees say about you? What's your strengths?
Well, I definitely know what my weaknesses are.
Tell us those then.
My weaknesses, I'm too soft, and I tend to look after the individual probably more than I should, and I do like.
Would it be fair to say that served you well though?
It has served me well, and look, we've all got pressures. It could be at home, could be at work, could be social pressures, could be mental pressures. But I think it's really important to understand your staff, and I think I speak to the staff on a regular basis. We meet at 7:30, we have a cup of tea. A lot of us do down there, and I listen to what they're doing on a daily basis. And if they have a problem, they feel comfortable in coming to talk to me about it. And it could be a bad back because of the car they've particularly got given them a problem, and what we try to do, we try to change that car, or we'll buy them a different car, or it could be anything.
But do you think that being soft has caught up with you at some points, but has served you better than it's caught up with you, if that makes sense?
Well, life's just you learn things every day of the week, don't you? And most definitely there've been times where I thought I could have been a little bit tougher there. On the other hand, I think the times when I think I've been a little bit softer have helped me more. Most definitely, because I can't do all this on my own. I often joke to the staff, if only I could have done everything myself.
Because you have a similar philosophy to me about the company and the people within it. For you, even though you've started this 33 years ago and you're still in on a day-to-day basis and you're still in control to a degree of most things, the company's still bigger than you, isn't it? Rather than you being bigger than the company.
It is, because nobody's bigger than the company. And even Sodick as an absolute brand is fabulous. And our little Sodick here, nobody's bigger than the company. So as long as you keep that in the back of your head, that it's really important to be grounded and represent the product in the correct way. As you can see, we all wear branded products. We're really proud of the name and the company and what it's become.
Best bit, Peter, finally, about your career, your highlights. We spoke earlier about the travelling and that time in your life. You often look back at your life and think that was a really great time and this was a great time. Could you just summarise for me what you think has been, the highlights of your career so far? Highlights
of my career really I would still go back to Bridgeport. again, I thought Bridgeport was a fabulous company, and really should have still been there today. And the chance to learn was huge, and I really liked the product, and we had a brilliant dealer network. The people were really nice. So the highlight would be Bridgeport, and most definitely the first 5 to 10 years of Sodick. And after that 5 to 10 years, things seem to change a little bit. You get more responsibilities, more.
And perhaps because you're a little bit older, you worry about things a little bit more than you would have done back in. I always think when you're quite young, you've got time on your side to change things if things goes wrong. I always think as you get a little bit older, you kind of think time's creeping up a bit now. So if I don't make things right now, then I haven't got so much time on my side to change them.
Well, it's certainly my age now. The thing is that it's not money, it's time. You know, so yeah, you're absolutely correct. You do, because you're trying to move it on to the next generation. You know, I have my son and my daughter here, as you know, and so it's now picking the correct time of which to give that responsibility over. And
when you do, what are you going to be doing? You're going to be going back to the football pitch, or have you changed your sport of leisure these days? Would we still see you on the five-a-side court?
Walking football, maybe, I think, but no. Even for me, it's not a matter of finishing and stopping. It would be a matter of doing less days, really. I mean, I'd like to think that I could still do 2 or 3 days in the future, and just make sure everything's ticking over nicely, and keep that relationship with the Japanese, to be quite honest.
And that gives you a perfect work-life balance as well, because you could be on the golf course the other 2 days, or following Birmingham City as you do in the football season, whether you'd want to now or not. I don't know.
That's tough. Let's not talk about football, please. It's golf is much better to talk about. But yeah, no, the idea is to play a little bit more golf, and yeah, just.
Well, Peter, it's been fabulous to sit with you and learn so much about your life, your journey, your experience, and the knowledge that you can impart, if that's the right word, on our audience. And so thanks for joining us today. It's been pleasurable.
It's been my pleasure.
Thank you, Peter.
Thank you very much.